If you're looking to buy a Mark 5 GTI or anything along the lines of a Mark 5 GTI in the near future, then watch the rest of this video. We may as well get red flag number one out of the way. If the car is based in areas like Bradford, Birmingham, or even areas of London, then do yourself a favour and at least do an HPI check on the vehicle. And if you really think that car is actually going to be the one for you, then just be extremely mindful when you go and look at those cars. If you turn up and the car looks a complete nail compared to the images, perhaps you've not even gone in the car, perhaps you've not even started it up, then the chances are it's probably a nail. Regards to buying something either modified or stock, they both have their pros and cons. Buying modified, there's a chance that either the car's been ragged around like no tomorrow and probably hasn't been looked after very well. That's more of the tunnel vision's perception to have on it. Flip side to buying something modified, the previous owners have probably spent some decent time and money on putting the modifications on the car, and they probably covered all the serviceable items and probably done things that people often overlook. Regards to buying stock, obviously the vehicle's never been tampered with, which is obviously a pro. And seeing as I've said obviously about 30 times in the past minute, I may as well continue that. Obviously, if the car's never been tampered with, the chances are it's not got very many owners. The chances are it's probably someone that's maybe like a careful previous lady owner, in which case also is a pro and con. Pro being that it's not been hooned everywhere, redlined and bashed up and down dual carriageways. Con is it's probably never been driven properly, meaning the turbo is probably clogged full of crap, and so is the cat. Another reason why buying modified, you probably get a decat. And of course, with it not being driven properly, the chances are it's probably just been driven straight from cold every single day of its fucking life since being born onto planet Earth. And on top of that, if they've bought a DSG one and it's a typical lady previous owner, then the chances are it's just been resting in park and the handbrake's never been used either. I'm going to assume modified is probably becoming the more appealing option to you lot. So regards to things you need to keep an eye out for, make sure that these things have been replaced or kept on top of maintenance wise, I have put a very small list together, and if I can figure out how to put the screenshot of the list up on here, then screenshot it, obviously. The first thing is please make sure the cam follower has been replaced, okay? If you don't know what it is, just Google it. This is quite literally a make or break deal with your car, and it costs maybe less than £40 to do the whole job if you're going to do it yourself. Then there's the obvious things like timing chain, cam bell, water pump, oil services for the engine, and for those that are looking for a DSG GTI, which for those of you that don't know what DSG is, it's the automatic gearbox with the paddles and the steering wheel. You'll definitely want to make sure that those DSG services have been kept on top of. The last thing you want is a mechatronics failure or, I don't know, a gear leaving the chat or something. I believe it's every 40k that the service needs to be done. Now, a few things that people always overlook that aren't too clued up on GTIs or anything that's like TFSI or maybe even TSI related is the diverter valve, okay? Probably worthwhile if you've got a spare £50 or maybe £70 if you're not going to do the job yourself. It's probably worthwhile just buying the part from, I don't know, Awesome GTI or something, and just getting it done, and that way it's done for peace of mind. People will literally spend hundreds of pounds checking for boost leaks, replacing, I don't know, fucking intercooler pipes and God knows what else, maybe even replacing a turbo for the sake of like a £55 serviceable item. Basically the insides, like the seals and everything, they just fall apart, the spring can shit itself, and you can go for an option called the Revision G, which is also a pro and con. Pro being that it's just a better working valve. The con is they seem to wear more than I think the Rev D. Another thing is these cars typically like to starve themselves with oil or just eat oil like no tomorrow, especially with the AXX engines, which is like the older generation of these GTIs. For that, you want to make sure things like the pickup pipe has either been cleaned or been replaced. Again, something that someone would have probably done if the car was already modified. Then you have the dreaded things like the PCV. So you've got the main PCV itself. PCV deletes are pretty hit and miss whether or not they're actually worthwhile doing. And then you have the PCV hoses, which get extremely brittle over time, and people tend to just bodge them with like silicone hoses or something, and it's just not great. Great recipe to have your engine looking like Stephen Hawkins. And seeing as this video is now about the length of a Harry Potter film, I'm just going to drop the last thing in my opinion, and that is an inlet and injector clean, like the fuel injector, not some dodgy syringe for an injection that you found on the floor outside of a chemist. Yeah, the inlet manifold just gets clogged up with carbon, like extremely easy. You could have it cleaned out and then within a week it ends up being built up with carbon again. And the injectors can also end up getting clogged up with shit as well. So to round this video up, if you're going to buy modified, my desirable mods would be if it's lowered, if it's got an exhaust, and if it's got an intake. That's probably going to save you the best part of £1,000 of parts alone. If you want me to drop a video on maybe easy mods that are cheap and effective, then let me know in the comments.